I had the black side of a Berlin defense in this 10-minute rapid game on Lichess. So here the move knight f6 is the Berlin defense. Castles is the main line, but my opponent played d3, which is known as the anti-Berlin. Okay, I responded bishop c5, posting the bishop on a strong diagonal, getting it outside of my pawn chain, but also bishop to c5 indirectly defends my e-pawn due to a tactical sequence. If white tries to win it by removing my defender, I can recapture with my d-pawn, and if he takes the e-pawn, there's queen to d4, forking the knight and a mate, and so white loses a piece in that line. So he can't win the e-pawn. So instead my opponent played down the main line with c3. He wants to expand in the center with d4. He also may be creating an escape path for his bishop back to c2 if it gets harassed. I castled, and then my opponent played a move I never would have thought of in a million years. When I looked at the Lichess database after the game, there were about 1,500 games in this position in the master database, and not one of them had this move, a4. Okay, it's not an entirely pointless move. It's not a bad move, but it's kind of strange looking. White is expanding on the queen side, trying to gain more space, and it does come with a minor threat. White can expand even further with b4 attacking my bishop, and the bishop would not be able to retreat back to b6 because the a-pawn can push forward again and trap it. So that might be the purpose of that move. But also after my move a6, which gives me a retreat square for my bishop, so I want to remain on that strong diagonal, my opponent played bishop to c4, and we see another purpose of this move a4, which is to stop me from expanding further with b5 in this position. However, the computer didn't like the move bishop c4. It preferred exchanging for the knight, I think by far. On c4, it can immediately get attacked, and I played the move d5. So I actually beat white to the center. I expand in the center with d5 before he plays d4. My d5 pawn is guarded by my knight and queen, so that makes that move possible. So he exchanged pawns, and then he plays another kind of strange looking move, very strange looking move. I think it's a terrible move. g3. Doesn't seem to have much to do with the position on the board. In my eye, all it does is weaken all of these light squares on the king side, and this bishop is not over on the king side defending. So it just is a weakening move, and it doesn't seem to serve any purpose other than perhaps keeping my knight off of the f4 square, which his bishop did have guarded. But anyway, I played bishop g4, pinning the knight, taking advantage of the light squared weakness, and then my opponent makes another mistake, knight bd2. This disrupts the queen's protection of his d-pawn, and so I decided to remove my knight to attack the pawn with my queen and gain time by playing knight to b6, attacking his bishop. He takes time to play h3, but I don't think that's just I don't think that gains any time, because it just allows me to reposition my bishop to a new diagonal, hitting that weakened d-pawn. So it actually helps me attack him further. Okay. Anyway, he plays queen to e2 to guard d3, but that allows me to take his bishop, and he cannot take back with his knight because bishop takes d3 would fork the queen and knight, and I would win a piece. So he's forced to take back with his pawn like he did, but that still allows bishop to d3, and the queen has no squares other than its original square on d1. So if we look at the position here, black already has a big lead. This bishop is preventing white from castling. This bishop is pointed menacingly towards the f2 square. This queen has this open file to work with. Black is threatening to push the e-pawn, harass that knight, and gain the e5 square for his knight to come in for a further attack. The rook can come to the e-file. So black has a huge initiative in this position. White still hasn't castled and his pieces aren't developed. He doesn't have this queen or rook developed. And he put his queen back on the original square. Okay, so I do play e4, and his knight really has no good squares. Maybe it has to go to h4 in this position. It doesn't really want to retreat back here. He tried playing it to d4, but that doesn't allow me to win a pawn and bring my queen into the attack. So now I have this battery on the f2 square, and there's no good way to defend it. The only way to defend it is with the rook, and it doesn't want to come to f1 and get taken by the bishop. So my opponent played rook to h2. But that allows e3 attacking further against this f2 square, and it's forking the knight and the pawn. And there really is no defense here. For example, taking the pawn allows queen takes e3 check. He doesn't want to block with his queen and lose the queen to my bishop, so he'd have to block with the rook, but that allows a mate in 2. Queen takes g3 check. King can go here, and then the bishop can go to g1 mate, or the rook can block, but then we just take it mate anyway. Okay, so you can't take that pawn, and you can't just sit there and wait for me to take the pawn either, because f2 is guarded by these two pieces, and so you're going to lose. So there's really nothing to do in this position. White tried moving his knight. He does fork my queen and bishop, but this does allow me to take the f2 pawn. He can't recapture because this is an immediate mate. But he can't do anything else either. The only other legal move is king comes up, but that allowed bishop to b4 mate. So I was quite happy with this game, checkmate in 19 against a strong opponent who maybe didn't play the strongest game, but the computer said that I played it quite well. All right, thanks for watching.